right. The next thing is this. The character education, so number 6, is one of the first things left out when crunch time comes. And that's natural. You don't have to do character education. You have to present your material. You have to turn your grades in. You have to take attendance. You have to do this. You have to do that. You have to fill out forms. You don't have to do character education. Remember I talked about that evaluation? You know the shocking thing about it? When I talk to teachers about that, how many teachers tell me 100% of my evaluation was test preparation? 0% is what are you doing to make better human beings? That's just the system that we're in. I'm not blaming administrators. You know, they get evaluated too. You know, but it's the first thing left out. I want to ask you, how many of you keep a job list? Here's my job list. That's for today. I'm a great believer in it. I'm obsessed by it. I want to get everything done every day. But let's just say I look at my job list. I have 18 things on my job list, all right? Well, the first things that I have to do, I have to get those done. Same thing with you and your teaching. You have to do these things. You don't have to do character education. So therefore, at the end of the day, even with the greatest intentions in the world, they get left out. You know, character education is talked about all the time. Everybody, oh yeah, I'm all in. But the reality is, does it happen? You know, I want to give you a quote from an American president. Character is the most important ingredient to being a president. Every president should be evaluated on how they conduct character while their time in office. What president made that quote? That quote was from Richard Nixon. Now, I'm not criticizing, was Richard Nixon a good president, a bad president? What effect did he have? What party did he belong to? I don't care. But I do know this, the end of his career certainly did end up in what you would define as a character-defining moment, as simple as that. But yet he had that saying, most important quality in a president is character. All right, number 7, and this is a huge one. A lot of educators feel like that's not my area of expertise. You know, think about it. How many of you took a full-time class in college on character education? I hope it was interwoven. I know it was interwoven into a lot of classes. But why isn't it a full-time class? Why isn't it something that people say this is one of the most important things that you can do to be successful as a teacher? Well, that's what this class is. That's why, you know, I have a passion for this class. I think that every educator should take a class similar to this. I think that every college should incorporate it into their curriculum. You know, talking about the role of character education in schools and the training, the history of education has been a balance. On the one hand, you have what are called the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Everything in the school should be focused on that. Everything else is going to be taken care of at the home, and I'm going to come back and talk about that. But the schools should do one thing: reading, writing, and arithmetic. You know, in the 50s, we were in the Cold War, and everyone says we've got to beat the Russians. Whoever gets to the moon first is going to be able to fire rockets down on everybody else and is going to blow the rest of the world up. That's not true. But in the 50s, it was a common belief. So therefore, the only thing that matters in school is math 1, science 2, reading, writing, and arithmetic. That is it. Nothing else. Phys ed, drop it. Music, drop it. Home ec, drop it. Business, drop it. As simple as that. Everything was reading, writing, arithmetic. All right? I think what's the other end of the spectrum? Dr. Martin Luther King, Tom Webb, Jim Place. I hope you. Character education. Let's develop the whole student. There's been times in our country where that dominated, maybe to the extent of too much, where we were not focusing enough on content. Where are you on that spectrum? Where's your school district on that spectrum? Do you match up in a school district that's on that spectrum the same place you are? My personal experience in talking to educators is most of them feel like, hey, I'm more this way, but my school district is more this way. And that leads to a lot of frustration. That leads to a lot of teachers feeling angry, as simple as that. Well, and that's a part of life. Boy, if you're working in a district that's over here, that's wonderful. Now, one thing about that whole formula, reading, writing, arithmetic over here, character education over here, they don't have to fight against each other. They're not in contradiction to each other. One thing I think is that every educator has to respect each other. Let's say that there's an educator in your building that leans way over here. Well, if they're a great reading, writing, and arithmetic teacher, that's wonderful, and I respect them. I can think of a particular math teacher that I really hoped that all three of my children got because she was so good at teaching math. She was a wonderful. She had technique. When my children finished her class, they had mastered that material. Remember this: a master teacher can cover a year and a half of material in a year. A poor performing teacher covers a half a year. An average teacher covers a year. So over a period of time, let's say that your children were fortunate enough to have all master teachers. Where are they at? Let's say over a period of time, your children had poor teachers. Where are they at? There's a role, a huge role for imparting knowledge in the content area, and I want teachers that are going to do that. But at the same time, at the other end, are teachers who are really strong in character education. Well, that's wonderful as long as they incorporate it into everything else. If you go in and say, well, what did you do in that class today? Well, we didn't do anything, we had a lot of fun. That's not going to work either. As simple as that. The balance, the key is the balance. Where do you fit in? Can you get a little stronger in one area and a little stronger in the other area? But also the key to a successful school is you got to realize a whole lot of personalities make up that school. You got to respect each other. You know, those people that are really really stressed reading, writing, arithmetic, you got to understand, I hope that they see reading, writing, arithmetic is a way of making their students better human beings to be more successful in life. It's just as simple as that. I hope that the people on this spectrum respect them. I hope the people on this spectrum respect these people and say, you know what, their teaching techniques are a little different than mine. They do this thing at the end of every day called 3 minutes of character and all kinds of things like that. Well, you got to respect that. It takes a lot of different personalities to make a school work. You know, the bottom line is you got to look back in June and say, what happened? Was I successful or not successful? And what were the ingredients to making that happen? So what are you to do? Are you focused totally on reading, writing, arithmetic, or are you focused on character education? Quite obviously, it's a balance. But here's something I want to interject. Today's world, parents and community are demanding both. You may not like it, but it's a reality. It's something that we're stuck with. You know, something that surprises me or sometimes, I guess, frustrates is that parents and community expect the schools to be responsible for everything. I have a good friend that was a principal at Centerville High School, and I would pick up the paper on a Sunday morning, and she'd be interviewed about students that were caught drinking behind a church on Friday night at 1 o'clock in the morning. And they would say, Principal so-and-so had this comment. Well, wait a minute. She's got to be responsible for what the students are doing at 1 o'clock in the morning behind a church? The community expects that. Yes, she got quoted. That's who was called for the interview in the paper. You know, we're expected to have total control over everything that our students do, and yet we have very little control over what they do outside of school, just as simple as that. I think this leads to a tremendous amount of frustration on the part of teachers, rightfully so. Tremendous part of anger. You mean not only do I have to educate these young people, but I also have to play a major role in them becoming good people? Yes, community expects it. All right, right or wrong, it's the way it is. Now, here's one thing I believe. I believe we can do it. Let's keep going back to this. Character education is not on the plate, it is the plate. It can be incorporated into everything we do. It doesn't have to be separate. The more we focus on character education, the better the academic performance of our students. I think if you'll take that attitude, it can help you deal with the frustration of the demands the communities are making on our teachers at this time. I think that it doesn't just happen, though. I think that you have to have a plan for that.